When a giant photograph of a child appeared looming over the U.S.-Mexico border near San Diego this fall, art aficionados knew right away it was the work of an artist who calls himself J.R. You may have never heard of J.R., but his giant photographs have appeared in some 140 countries, sometimes in fancy art galleries, but more often than not pasted illegally on sidewalks and subways, buildings and rooftops. Plenty of famous artists like Basquiat and Keith Haring started out scrawling their work on the streets, often in the dead of night. But few have continually displayed their art in public spaces on the scale of J.R. This is the photograph that popped up in September along the U.S.-Mexico border. A 64-foot-tall picture of a Mexican child named Kikito who lives just on the other side of the fence. Built on scaffolding on Mexican soil, there was nothing U.S. Border Patrol agents could do about it. It was classic J.R., a person's picture pasted in a public place that made everyone stop and stare. J.R. has been doing this kind of thing all over the world for the past 14 years. He put the faces of Kenyans on rooftops in a Nairobi slum. In Cuba, where oversized images of Castro and Che are the norm, J.R. put up enormous pictures of everyday people. On New York sidewalks and Istanbul buildings, in Tunisia during the Arab Spring in a looted police station, J.R. has pasted his pictures, often without permission and at risk of being arrested.
Outside of Paris in the 1970s.
We met up with J.R. in a suburb of Paris in front of a giant mural he'd made out of photographs of more than 700 local residents.
So that's why I put them in the center.
We don't know his real name, and that's just how J.R. wants it. In public, he never takes off his glasses or hat. There's a practical reason for it, but a little mystery also builds mystique in the world of art. What we do know is that J.R. is 35 years old and was born in France, the child of Tunisian immigrants. I don't think I've ever done an interview for 60 Minutes when I didn't actually know the name of the person I'm interviewing. You're not going to tell me your name.
Would it help, you know? I mean, in a lot of countries...
It would help me.
In countries where I got arrested,
It's important for you to be anonymous.
Yeah, because unfortunately, when I travel in a lot of other countries where what I do, just paper and glue, is not considered as art, I get arrested, deported, put in jail.
What's art in one country is a jailable offense in another.
Exactly.
J.R. has been committing jailable offenses since he was a teenager. He says he was repeatedly kicked out of high school and would sneak out at night with friends, spray painting graffiti in hard-to-reach areas. Graffiti or tagging, what was the appeal of that?
We all have that sense of, I want to exist. I want to show that I'm here, that I'm present.
Graffitiing was saying, I am here. I am a person.
Exactly. I'm here. I exist.
His foray into photography began, he says, by accident.
I found a camera in the subway, a tiny camera.
You really just found it?
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's funny because a lot of friends tease me, yeah, right, you started your career stealing a camera.
I'm not sure the police would believe that story, but...
I know, but,
some things are true.
Exactly. And at some point I realized I was not the best in graffiti. I had the balls to climb any building you want, but I would not do the craziest piece. But I was with friends who were amazing. Then I realized, wait, let me document the journey.
The journey of it.
Yeah, and so I went from I exist to they exist, and I realized the power of that.
Once photography got into the picture, it was about these other people exist.
Exactly.
They exist.
They exist. On remarche ensemble, tu vas vers Clichy-Plage.
Many of J.R.'s friends in this Paris suburb, whom he began taking pictures of, felt they didn't exist in the eyes of French society. Most of those who live in this neighborhood are of African or Arab descent, first or second generation immigrants, and few wealthy Parisians ever venture here. In 2005, riots broke out in this neighborhood after 2 kids died while being chased by police. The violence spread across France. J.R. saw how the young people in the suburb were being portrayed on television and decided to use his camera to tell a different story.
You would see the riots, everyone had hoodies, and then so any kids coming from the suburb would look like a monster to you. So that's when I started photographing them from really close. And I said, I'm going to put your name, your age, your building number on the poster. And I'm going to paste it in Paris, where they see you as a monster. And actually, you're going to play your own caricature.
Why play your own caricature? Isn't that feeding a stereotype?
It's actually, by feeding it, it breaks it. And I wanted them to be in control of their own image.
And you wanted people in Paris who maybe had never been to this neighborhood To understand what?
The humanity. When you look at this face, it makes you want to smile. By playing the monster, they don't look like monster anymore.
JR enlarged the pictures and printed them out, and with friends began pasting them up illegally at night around Paris. Most were immediately taken down, but the mayor of one Parisian district gave JR permission to paste them on a wall outside a museum. It was JR's first official public art exhibit. He was 23 years old.
The people from Paris would go in front of those pictures and take a photo of themselves with them. And people were trying to find who is who and get a photo with them where they're supposed to be the monsters that are about to invade Paris. So it kind of break the tension that there was.
The idea of breaking tension through photography was a revelation to JR. In 2007, with money saved from odd jobs, he decided to head to Israel. It was after the Second Intifada, and his plan was to paste photographs on the wall separating Palestinians and Israelis in the West Bank.
So I started making a list of people doing the same job on each side: hairdresser, taxi driver, security guard, teacher, student. And then I would go and I would say, look, I want to paste you playing your own caricature of how the other sees you, but I would paste you with the other taxi driver. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, take my photo. But the other guy, he's never going to accept. They're really close-minded. They're never going to accept. Then when I go there, same thing.
Each person on each side said, I'll do it, but the person on the other side won't do it.
Exactly.
Before he could begin pasting the photographs, JR and his team were arrested by Israeli authorities for not having a permit. They were loaded into the back of a wagon and hauled off to jail. After some questioning, they were released and given 15 days to leave the country. Instead, JR went to the Palestinian side of the wall and began to paste.
I paste a giant photo of the taxi driver and a second photo of the other taxi driver, and a crowd of people, very quickly, big crowds. And then first guy asked the question, but my friend, who is these people? I say, oh, one is Israeli and one is Palestinian. And then you have a big silence on the crowd. And I say, so who is who? And they couldn't even recognize their enemy or their brother.
On the Israeli side, to ensure he wouldn't be arrested again, JR announced the day and time he was going to put up his photographs. He says so many reporters and onlookers showed up to watch, the authorities decided to just let him go ahead with his project. The attention he got from his work in the Middle East and France led to some sales of his photographs, which then allowed him to begin to travel further afield. Over the next few years in Kenya, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, he focused his lens on women, heroes, he says, who are often treated as second-class citizens. He photographed women's faces and placed them where they could no longer be ignored. A Kenyan woman named Elizabeth Kamanga asked JR to paste her picture for all the world to see.
The woman asked me, make my story travel.
Have my story travel around the world.
There was someone that they never heard of to hear, like sending a bottle in the water.
Her story did travel thousands of miles around the world. JR pasted her eyes onto a container ship called the Magellan that spent months at sea. In 2008, he ventured into Providencia, the oldest favela in Rio, a slum perched on a hillside controlled by a well-armed gang of drug dealers. JR photographed an elderly woman whose grandson was murdered by a rival gang. She agreed to let him paste her image on the stairs leading into the neighborhood. Did you have permission from any of the gangs?
From nobody. We start pasting the stairs like that. Great vibe, kids playing, we're just pasting on the stairs. After 10 stairs, huge fights of guns. And it started going from all over.
JR and his team were caught in crossfire between police and gang members.
We run and we hide like it's the last day of my life. And the next day, we came back and we kept on doing the stairs. And I think that what made the people in the community realize that, okay, we're not just here for a minute. And that first time when that woman was pasted on the stairs, everybody in the community understood what the project was about. It was her, she was standing there straight and looking strong.
Her photo covered 80 steps, and after that, other residents allowed JR to post their faces and eyes on the sides of their homes. A display of strength and dignity, he says, that could be seen from the wealthier neighborhood below. That word dignity to you is important.
You know, the people made me realize it's important in every single pasting.
Dignity is something that all of us want.
All of us.
No matter
Anywhere,
what, any
no
walk of
matter
life.
the background.
Why? Because the issues people are facing are life and death.
Of course. Dignity goes through the way we're being seen by the others, the way we portray ourselves.
I think some people hearing that are going to say, look, you're telling me that people, who don't know where their next meal is coming from are struggling to survive, care about art?
You know what? Yes.
If you're wondering how JR pays for all these projects, so were we.
Si nous avait fait un close-up comme ça.
He now has a team of about 16 people working for him out of studios in Paris and New York. He doesn't like to give details of how much his projects cost, but some of the money comes from the sale of limited edition prints of his work. He doesn't accept any sponsorship from corporations, but he does have wealthy art patrons who help him out.
There's amazing people out there. There's people that support me. There's someone that gave me a building to put my studio that I don't pay rent, so I don't have to look for sponsors. There are amazing people that I called the shadow philanthropists, the people who really want to change.
Shadow philanthropists.
Yeah, and that don't look for return. They don't get into philanthropy to get more credit.
JR's work may focus on other people, but it's also made him a celebrity in his own right. He has more than 1 million followers on Instagram and routinely is seen in the company of rock stars and other artists. Last month, a documentary JR directed called Faces, Places was nominated for an Oscar.
Can you press me some glue?
Fame has its benefits. JR doesn't always have to sneak around now. He's often allowed to display his work. So when were you doing the work inside? A few months ago on Ellis Island in New York Harbor, the National Park Service let him paste old photographs of immigrants at this abandoned hospital.
That's the little girl.
And what does it mean?
You know, I just try to do art in places that it would raise questions rather to give answers.
JR is now encouraging others to raise questions by pasting their own photographs. He has a website where groups of people with an idea or a cause can send in their pictures. He says he'll enlarge and print them and ship them back. JR-inspired images have so far been pasted on walls in dozens of countries around the world. Are you still an artist if you're not taking the photo and you're just printing stuff up and sending it out to people and they're putting it up?
I don't know. I mean, I am as much as a printer. I'm a photographer. That I'm a wallpaper man. You know, that's what I do. Man. At the end of the day, I wallpaper buildings. You know, that's what I do. So that's why I think the title artist is the most prestigious title I'll ever get, because, you know, the truth is I paste building.
Mark Bradford is widely considered one of the most important and influential artists in America today. His abstract canvases, which often deal with complex social and political issues, hang in major museums around the world and on the walls of big collectors and some small ones like me. Bradford's art may look like paintings, but there's hardly any paint on them. They're made out of layers and layers of paper, which he tears, glues, power washes, and sands in a style all his own. When he began making art in his 30s, Bradford couldn't afford expensive paint, so he started experimenting with end papers that are used for styling hair. He got the idea while working as a hairstylist in his mom's beauty shop in South Los Angeles. He was broke, struggling, and didn't sell his first painting until he was nearly 40. I heard a story that when you sold your first artwork in 2001, you called up your mom. Do you remember what you said to her?
I said, girl, I think I found a way out of the beauty shop. Girl, I think I found a way out of the beauty shop, yeah. Yeah, because I had no idea how I was going to stop being a hairstylist, because that's really the only thing that I knew. I didn't have a problem with being a hairstylist, but that's all I knew.
It's incredible to think that 2001 is when you first sold a work.
Yeah.
And now...
I still sell works.
Yeah, you sure do.
I sure do.
This is the top.
His first painting sold for $5,000. Now they can sell for more than $10 million. This new one was bought by the Broad Museum in Los Angeles. They have 9 other Bradfords in their collection.
1, 2, 3.
It's called Deep Blue. It's 12 feet high, 50 feet long, and took a full day to install.
That's all right. That is all right.
None of those colors you see are paint. It's all paper layered on canvas. It's abstract, but not entirely. See those lines that form a grid? It's a street map of the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles. The colored balls show where properties were damaged in 1965 after 6 days of violent civil unrest, protests over police brutality and racial inequality. We first saw the painting nearly a year ago when Bradford had just started working on it in his studio in South Los Angeles. He'd already made the map of Watts out of bathroom caulking. The following month, when we stopped by again, he'd laid down 14 layers of colored paper and covered it all up with a layer of black.
So there's a map underneath here.
Yes.
Of Watts.
All these little points are what was looted, what was destroyed. So I kind of start from a map, and then on top of it, I think I lay art history and my imagination, all 3.
Bradford uses household tools to make his paintings. He likes to buy everything at Home Depot.
My motto is if Home Depot didn't have it, Mark Bradford didn't use it.
That's your motto.
That's my motto. That was my motto.
To this day,
to this day.
Building up the layers of paper on the canvas is just the beginning of his process. He then starts to peel, cut, and sand them down, which can take months.
it's like an archaeological dig.
It is like an archaeological dig. It's like history. I'm creating my own archaeological or psychological digs. Sometimes when I'm digging on my own painting, I'm asking myself, well, exactly what are you digging for? Where do you want to go, child? Oh, see, look at that. See, now see that, I like.
A lot of people get an abstract painting and think it's squiggles, it's torn paper. I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's true. But for me, those squiggles and torn paper gives me a space to kind of unpack things, like the Watts riots. I'm grappling with how I feel about that subject and that material. I do grapple with things. I grapple with things personally and, racially and politically. What does it mean to be me?
Mark Bradford has been grappling with that question in his art for the last 18 years, from making paintings out of street posters like those offering predatory loans in low-income neighborhoods, to creating works that address HIV/AIDS, racism, and the complexity of American history. He's 57 years old now, and at 6'8", stands out in a crowd. He still lives in South Los Angeles, where he grew up. When he was 8, he says, he began to get bullied by neighborhood kids.
That was the first time I felt different. That was the first time I was aware of my sensitivity. That's the first time someone said, "Oh, you're a sissy." I definitely knew that I had to learn to navigate in a more cautious way so that I could survive. I just never had a problem being me.
So even though they were calling you sissy, it didn't make you want to try to change yourself?
Not really. No, not really. I just didn't want to get my ass whooped.
He was raised by his mother, Janice Banks, who owned her own beauty salon. That's where Bradford would head every day after school.
I knew that I had to find a way to get across the schoolyard. I knew that my mother was always going to be there once I got across the schoolyard. And maybe, I was in the hair salon every day watching women get across the schoolyard. I would hear their stories. I would watch them go through, and I just thought, if they can do it, I most certainly can do it.
Mark Bradford started working in the salon as a teenager, eventually becoming a hairstylist. It was a safe place where he could be himself, but that feeling disappeared in 1981 when his friends began dying from AIDS.
I knew a storm was coming. I knew that. In the gut, I knew that. And people were just dying. That's what it felt like to me at 18 years old. I just was thinking, how are we going to make it through?
Did you think you would make it through?
No, I didn't think I'd make it through.
Thinking he didn't have a future, he didn't plan for one. But when he was nearly 30, he took art classes at a junior college, and he says it clicked.
There was the reading and learning about different scholars and feminism and deconstructing modernism and all that. I just, oh man, I'm really into this. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but yeah.
And you'd still work at the hair salon?
Oh, every day.
And so you'd be studying while at the hair salon?
Oh, absolutely. I put the book in their lap and say, girl, read that back to me.
He won a scholarship to the California Institute of the Arts, but struggled to make money as an artist. When he was 39, he finally had a breakthrough.
I was working on a head.
Working on a head?
Working on a head, working on
At the beauty salon?
Beauty salon, yeah. Because I was still working the hair salon, Anderson. I told you that.
I just didn't know that terminology.
I was hooking it up.
Okay.
Right. Late at night, I was tired as hell, too. And just end papers fell on the floor. And I looked down and I thought, oh, they're translucent. Oh, I could use these.
End papers are small, rectangular tissues used to make permanent waves in hair. Bradford began burning the paper's edges and lining them up into grids he glued onto bed sheets.
I knew I was onto something. I knew this was bridging. This material came from a site outside of the paint store. I think early on I was trying to weave these two sides of who I was together, the art world and the sites that I had come from, the life that I had led. I didn't want to leave any of it behind. I didn't want to edit out anything.
Private collectors began snapping up his end paper paintings, and his career took off. He's now a celebrity in the art world, and his gallery openings are star-studded events.
How are you?
At the latest one in Los Angeles, Beyoncé and Jay-Z, who own several Bradfords, stopped in. The 10 paintings in this exhibition sold out before the gallery doors opened.
Look how nice this is. Wow, it's gorgeous.
Bradford and his partner, more than 20 years, Alan DeCastro, are committed to using contemporary art and their own money to revitalize the neighborhood Bradford grew up in. In 2014, they opened Art and Practice with Eileen Harris Norden, the first collector to buy Bradford's work. It's a nonprofit complex of buildings that includes a gallery, lecture spaces, and his mother's old beauty salon.
This is the last hair salon that my mom worked in, and then I took it over from her. It was in the 90s. It was called Foxy Hair.
They turned Foxy Hair into a center for young adults transitioning out of foster care.
I would run down the block in here and buy myself whatever I needed to put back on the hair.
But we were surprised to learn that Mark Bradford still styles hair. He does it for some of his former clients from the beauty shop, who are also among his closest friends.
When you look around, does his art make sense to you?
It does. It's like a map
Lynette
of
said,
outer space.
I mean, I look at it, it's beautiful, but I don't really
get it.
no.
He gave me something from his studio a long time ago, and I put it in my garage.
She did. Wow.
I put it in my garage. This is before he got popular, I guess. And yeah, and it's all torn up. And this guy was like, you know, you have something like a Mona Lisa. I'm like, for real?
Wow.
No.
Y'all wrong for that.
I don't see it.
You don't see it?
I don't. But I like how you give a little insight of like what's going on in our community. I know that much about your art, so that much I really like.
Bradford's latest work continues to focus on difficult and controversial issues. This painting, which is prominently displayed in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, is called 150 Portrait Tone and was made in response to the 2016 fatal police shooting of Philando Castile during a traffic stop in Minnesota.
He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket, and he let the officer know.
Castile's girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, live-streamed the incident. Bradford was so haunted by her words, he made them into this painting.
Please don't tell me this, Lord. Please, Jesus, don't tell me that he's gone.
It's really the conversation that his girlfriend is having.
With multiple people, which I was fascinated by.
Why were you fascinated by it?
How composed she was. She was having a conversation with her daughter in the back seat, with Philando, who was passing away, with God, with us, Facebook, and with the policeman, all simultaneously. It was visual and textual and heartbreaking and heroic and strong all at the same time.
In another major new work, Bradford turned his gaze to the Civil War. It's called Pickett's Charge, and it's a reimagining of a pivotal Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg. It was commissioned by the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. Bradford used as his starting point blown-up photos of a 19th century panoramic painting of Pickett's Charge, a painting which offers a romanticized view of the Confederacy. He then added layers of paper and cords over it, then carefully gouged, shredded, and ripped it apart.
They almost feel like lacerations, almost scarring. That's what those feel like. And a little bit like bullet wounds, like it really punctures.
It's a 360-degree painting that raises many questions in Bradford's mind, particularly about how we look at history.
It's looking at it through a different lens.
Yes, that's the feeling that I wanted you to have, that history was laying on top of it, gouging into it, erasing it, bits of it showing. It's kind of me revising it.
So is this a more accurate representation of history?
I don't really believe history's ever fully accurate.
It's acknowledging that.
It's acknowledging the gaps,
Right.
the things we don't know.
So many people have come to see Pickett's Charge, the Hirshhorn has extended the exhibition for 3 more years. Bradford is already working on new paintings for shows in China, London, and New York.
Do you worry about the vagaries of the art world? What is popular today, 20 years from now?
Oh, no, I wouldn't have, no. I have never...
I mean, art has value because people believe it has value.
I think art has value because it has value. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to tell me my work has value. I certainly wasn't going to wait on people to tell me I had value. I'd probably still be waiting. It has value because I think it has value. And then if other people get on the value, Mark Bradford value train, great.
Over the years, we've done stories on all sorts of people. But to our knowledge, we have never done one on a late middle-aged man who dresses in biker gear with visible tattoos and sterling silver skull rings. And certainly not one who also happens to be fluent in French and advanced mathematics. No, Peter Marino is one of a kind. If you follow the worlds of art, architecture, and high fashion, you probably know he is a serious player in all of them. A tastemaker for some of the richest, most sophisticated people in the world, many of whom would agree Marino's appearance is actually one of the least interesting things about him.
At first glance, you might mistake him for the bouncer at a leather bar, a professional wrestler, or the frontman for a Village People tribute band. But here in Paris, at a reception for the Biennale, one of the oldest art and antique fairs in the world,
Hi, how are you? Madame Rizzo.
Peter Marino is instantly recognized.
I'm a big fan of
Oh, thank you, madam.
And actively courted by people you might think would run the other way.
Master.
But behind the threatening, keep-your-distance facade,
Monsieur, venez expliquer tout.
is an amusing, ironic, highly accomplished artist and businessman with a sensitive soul. His talents are demonstrated in the beauty and breadth of his design work and architecture, and contradict his carefully considered public image of a beast on a motorcycle.
People make first judgments about people based on their appearance. There's an old saying, the clothes make the man.
How about the older statement, don't judge a book by its cover?
But you want people to judge you by this look. This is your look.
Absolutely not. It's a decoy.
A decoy.
Sure. Would you think you're talking to a bright architect looking at a guy like me?
You still know calculus and trig and all of that stuff?
Had to get my license, and you got to keep your license up to date. You have to take 18 credits a year. That's the hardest part. You got to keep taking courses. Dude, they don't let you forget it. Yeah.
The arts and fashion worlds have always had a high tolerance for eccentricity. Take Tom Wolfe in his white suits, Karl Lagerfeld's dark glasses and fingerless gloves, and Lady Gaga.
On your left, guys.
There is no question that Marino's signature look has made him one of a handful of living architects actually recognized by the media.
One of your good friends said that you like the shock value. Like you like the fact that people say, what's with him?
I like more the fact that I like to think out of the box. Thinking out of the box goes along with dressing out of the box and living out of the box. If you want to come up with a really original design idea and you want to capture a whole new design direction. Perhaps the best way to arrive at that is not by acting and thinking and doing like everybody else. That's all.
If the getup was simply a publicity gimmick, Marino would have disappeared decades ago. His work would not be regularly featured in Architectural Digest and other glossy magazines. And the firm that bears his name would not be occupying 2 floors and 16,000 square feet of some of the most expensive office space in New York, which is furnished with museum-quality artwork, all from Marino's private collection. Paintings and sculpture, modern art and antiquities, all juxtaposed in perfect harmony.
This is quite a room. Quite a reception area. What is this piece?
This is 2003 Anselm Kiefer.
And this?
This is Gandharan, 3rd century AD.
Gandharan?
Yeah, it's from Gandhara, and it's the region just on the Silk Road where the Chinese culture and the Indian culture just met with the Greek culture. So
art is at the center of Marino's universe, and his knowledge of it is encyclopedic. He not only collects it, he curates it and commissions it for his projects. It covers nearly every inch of wall space and is here, he says, not to impress his clients, but to inspire the staff of 150 designers and architects with whom he turns out between 50 and 100 projects a year.
Design-wise, I look at everything. If I don't personally design it, I'll review it. I'm the kind of creative director of the firm.
You're a bit of a control freak.
You'd have to ask the staff for that.
Bordering on the tyrannical.
You'd have to confirm that with the staff.
Do you see yourself as a tyrannical boss?
No, I only care about the work, and I am not tyrannical personally in any way, shape, or form, but I am absolutely passionate about the quality of the work.
And so are the clients that can afford him, who mostly come from the world's wealthiest 1/100th of 1%, encompassing the glitterati and the emirati.
This is a residential project we're building on the top of Los Angeles. It's a large site assembled from over 7 homes, and this is in construction.
And what is this structure?
This is for the subterranean parking.
And this is a private home?
This is a private home. It's
And can you tell us anything about the owner?
No.
It's Marino's default answer. He won't comment about his clients, which have reportedly included the likes of multi-billionaires David Geffen and David Koch, as well as Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady. This home in Milan, we're told, was done for Giorgio Armani.
I like my clients. All of my clients say, Peter, you're talented, but your best virtue is your discretion. They really don't want to be talked about.
This Hamptons beach house was designed for a young hedge fund manager and his wife, and this ski chalet in Lebanon with ocean views for a Swiss banker. But for every private client Marino won't speak about, somewhere in the world he is unveiling a project that is the talk of the town. Like Boon the Shop, a multi-brand luxury shopping center that takes up 2 downtown blocks in Seoul, South Korea. No expense was spared.
It's all white Greek marble. These are trapezoids, like they fell to space. It's an interesting building because the entire inside is rough concrete.
He says it was built for the family that controls Samsung.
It's fair to say you work with some of the richest people in the world, right?
Yes.
Did they need to be treated a different way?
If they need to be treated a different way, no one's told me. I remember when I was meeting certain royal families, if I had to behave a certain way, like, you better tell me what I'm supposed to say and do. They went, the way you look, it doesn't really matter, just be yourself. And I went, okay.
Those partnerships can produce some unusual optics. We watched this meeting with Sidney Toledano, the CEO of Christian Dior, who is one of Marino's biggest clients and biggest fans. They have collaborated on dozens of Dior boutiques all over the world. Toledano is used to working with big egos and difficult people, but says Marino is not one of them.
I never had the impression that it was complicated because he always finds a solution, and he's very professional.
How important is it to your business? Or how important has he been to your business?
He has been key. Don't tell him.
He understands Dior.
He understands Dior.
Toledano sees Marino's look as an artistic presentation of his personality. He doesn't even mind the fact that Marino also works for most of his competitors.
This is a new building we'll be building for Chanel.
So you've got Chanel up here, you've got
Louis Vuitton.
Louis Vuitton. Who else?
Dior, Hublot, Zegna. We do Zegna worldwide. We do Bulgari. We're opening a new one in London in December. Fendi, if you just saw the Fendi on 57th and Madison.
For decades, Marino has been the architect of choice for nearly all of the top fashion designers and luxury brands, and is widely credited with reimagining the use of retail space, moving away from boxy department stores and into elegant boutiques. His work lines the most conspicuous avenues and boulevards of the world. It's a third of his business. Every store is unique, and each one distills the essence and the look of the company it was built for. A sense of travel and luxury for Louis Vuitton, the timeless classic look for Chanel.
How did you get them to all come to you?
It's the old question, why do they all go to you? Steve, would you go to a knee doctor who had done 2 knee operations if you need an operation, or one who had done 300 successfully? Who would you go to? That's why they come to me.
Marino's work ethic and personality are rooted in Queens, the New York neighborhood where he was born 67 years ago, the only son in a middle-class Italian family. In high school, he excelled in art and graduated from Cornell University in 1971 with a degree in architecture. He learned the trade from the very best, serving apprenticeships with I.M. Pei and Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. But he picked up the ways of the wealthy and the value of celebrity from another master, artist Andy Warhol, who always considered business one of the finer forms of art.
He certainly knew how to get attention.
The blonde wig. Dude, that was so good. The blonde wig, it's pretty hard to beat.
Marino did some early work for Warhol and hung out at his New York studio called The Factory, which was a magnet for music and movie stars, socialites, and royalty. Bob Colacello was the editor of Warhol's Interview magazine when Marino first walked through the door.
And what was he like?
He had little bow ties, and he was very properly dressed. You know, when he was funny, he was talented. You could see that right away.
Colacello, now a contributing editor at Vanity Fair magazine, and Isabel Rattazzi, a former model and longtime friend of Marino, think he has changed very little from those ironic factory days of Campbell soup cans and pop art parodies of fame.
Peter fed right into that. I mean, we were all on the same sort of wavelength, you know.
Tongue-in-cheek.
Tongue-in-cheek. A lot of what we were doing was very tongue-in-cheek. And Peter, I think, is still very tongue-in-cheek.
Totally. He's enjoying it. It's a way to have fun at other people's expenses sometimes. I think Peter, deep down, more than anything, is an artist. He has an incredible sense of aesthetics. He loves beauty and anything in art and music.
It's on display at Marino's 12-acre estate, where every summer there is a lavish party for friends to introduce young and up-and-coming classical musicians. It's hosted by Peter and Jane Trapnell, his waspy wife of 33 years, a charming and accomplished costume designer who friends say is an essential part of the equation.
She's too smart to be interviewed.
But you've been married a long time.
33 years. Yeah, it's great.
You don't look like the perfect couple, if you know what I mean.
It's a good marriage because each of us is what we are, allows the other one to be themselves, and appreciates each other for the right reason. You know, it's rare that you'll find two people who don't try to change the other person and let everyone be what they are.
What's this?
The only other constant in Marino's life, as you may have guessed, are motorcycles, his latest prominently displayed on the project board.
This is my Super Duke KTM 1290. Oof. It's very fast. You're supposed to say, does Jane sit on the back?
Does Jane sit on the back?
Absolutely not. She's in the back of a car and driver, and with the two dogs.
Marino finds cars claustrophobic. He has a half a dozen bikes, has ridden them all over the country, and regularly uses them to commute between New York and his home on Long Island. It's his release, and the core of his identity. Alone, on the road, where he can take in the air and the light and the space, all part of living life outside the box.